Recently, Wizards of the Coast released the third iteration in their premier Magic the Gathering set, Modern Horizons 3. Modern Horizons is always a set that is full of just the most busted, expensive cards you've ever seen in your life. We've already seen Modern itself getting absolutely blown wide open by Nadu, a card which people are already calling to be banned because it is so ridiculously powerful. And we've also seen the Ralph Flipwalker and the Ruby Amulet card introducing a pretty new Storm deck to the Modern meta, which is kind of turning heads and asking how many minutes can I spend on one turn before you just give up. But with these sets, with these ridiculously expensive sets that always blow things open and make booster packs more expensive than you've ever seen in your entire life, there are always cards like Nadu, like Rao, which just shake up formats that are essentially eternal, that have access to every Magic card pretty much ever printed, either from a set date or forever, or with like a short ban list which tweaks what you can access. The format we're talking about today is no different. There has been multiple cards which have really shaken up the format, but one that has introduced like a 2-card infinite combo, which is very, very powerful, can win on like turn 3, maybe even 2 if you're lucky. And as you can probably imagine, it's become quite popular, which means that it probably comes with quite a hefty price tag. I'm talking, of course, about the Basking Brood Scale, a card that will just become infinitely big and make infinite mana, which you can do ridiculous things with. So, with that in mind, let's see how stupidly expensive this thing is. That can't be right. It says here this card only costs like 2p on Card Market. You can get it for like 20 off a retail. Oh! Sorry, I forgot. This is Pauper. Pauper is a 60-card constructing format which doesn't rotate, which means that you have access to every single Magic the Gathering card ever printed. I don't know why I'm coming down here to my collection. I don't really have that many old cards, but Throne of Eldraine, for example, no longer exists in the standard rotation. But if you're playing Pauper, you can play cards that were printed in Throne of Eldraine, like this Fairy Godmother, for example. But there is one catch. Every single card that is in your deck, outside of following a generic ban list, which most formats have, has to have been at some point printed at common rarity, which means that whenever you pick up a Magic card and you see the little set symbol, if that's in black, it's good to go. Or sometimes, even if it's not, you can Google and see that they upshifted the rarity at some point when they did a reprint. If at least some point it was a common card, that means it's legal to play in Pauper. Now, you're probably wondering one of two things when you hear that. One, if I can only use cards that are common rarity or less, doesn't that make the format like really underpowered? Are you playing with just like the worst cards in all of Magic? And no, not really. One of the benefits of having a format that doesn't rotate, it means that you have basically access to every card ever printed, as long as it's common. And even though commons are supposed to be the least powerful cards in Magic, in fact, some of the most powerful cards in Magic were originally printed at common rarity. That includes fast mana like Rite of Flame and Dark Ritual. That includes Lightning Bolt, one of the most powerful cards in all of Magic. 1 red mana, 3 damage to any target, and you can have 4 copies in your deck. That's pretty huge. But it's not just about the individual cards. The thing about timeless formats and the thing that makes them such a high power level is that Wizards can't rotate things out that they accidentally broke when they built it. There are no cards outside of a ban list that are off limits, which means you can have a card that was printed all the way back in, 2004, which has some kind of ridiculous synergy with a card that just came out and has now spawned a brand new deck archetype. Modern Horizons 3 just came out, and yeah, there's a lot of powerful cards at rare level, but there's also a lot of powerful common cards. All of Limited at the moment is a little bit broken if at least one of the players has drafted lots of these Writhing Chrysalis cards. So I built a whole common Pauper deck out of it. And yeah, it goes hard. It's a really cool deck. It's just spamming out Eldrazi Spawn tokens and doing loads of impact tremors damage, as well as just giving you huge amounts of mana to use. And that's not something that you can do in standard rotation. No matter how mythic rare your cards are, that's not really a thing that exists right now. And it's one of the benefits of having a timeless format. So thing 2 you might be interested in. If this is an unlimited format, if I can play with cards from all of Magic's history, then surely this is going to cost a lot of money to get into, right? I've seen Vintage. I've seen how expensive some of those decks can be. Hell, I've seen Modern, what we've just been talking about. Some of the decks go up to like $1,000. If I wanted to run that new Nadu combo deck, I'd have to put a mortgage down to buy a deck like that. Is Pauper like that? Is it that expensive? No, the clue's in the name, right? Hence why I made a big joke out of the fact that one of the most popular cards right now is only costing you about 18p. There are expensive cards in Pauper. You know, a Lotus Petal is a Lotus Petal, no matter what format you play it in. But most of the cards will run you like nothing, like genuine pennies. And because so many of these cards are effectively bulk for a lot of people, you might even just have them knocking around already. Okay, so like Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Did you collect a lot of that? Like here we go. Here's all my black Lost Caverns of Ixalan cards. Let's go until I find a Pauper staple. Oh, okay, 4 cards in. Tithing Blade. Tithing Blade is a really popular card in Affinity decks right now. It's an artifact. It costs 2 mana, and when you put it on the board, it makes your opponent sacrifice a creature. Fantastic. Gets around hexproof. Makes them deal with difficult decisions whilst you're just dumping more artifacts on the board that you can use to cast things for free with your Affinity deck. There's loads of stuff that, you know, could just be gathering dust in your collection right now, which is like half of a deck. And then you've got one of the top meta decks that you can play at tournament level. And this is one of the other things that I want to talk about. Okay, Wheels, we get it. Like the Pauper format doesn't rotate. One of the most popular formats in all of Magic the Gathering, probably the most, is Commander, and that doesn't rotate either. I can play with cards like Lightning Bolt, like Dark Ritual that have existed since the start of the game. Okay, I get that. But can you build a deck that powerful in Commander with the same budget that you can in Pauper? I don't think you can. You can build a tournament-winning deck for less than the price of a Precon. That's huge. I'm not talking about Precon level standard tier. I'm talking about decks that win tournaments, decks that have, you know, 6-0 in Swiss rounds and go on to get the whole thing and go home with the cup. You can build for less than a Precon. That's ridiculous value. But all right, maybe I'm not worried about money. Maybe I already have a £1,000 Commander deck that is just the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen and wins with land destruction and all the most fancy counter spells that exist. That's fine. Don't do that. The main thing is, if you're used to just playing stuff like Commander, you might not realize how much fun 60 card formats are. We're talking, you know, Magic as written, as designed by Richard the Garfield, 2 players sat across each other on a table with 60 card decks with up to 4 copies, playing lands and casting spells and trying to get down each other's 20 health life totals. That is the core experience of Magic the Gathering. I love Commander. It's great. It's one of the most fun things you can do with a deck of cards, and I play it literally every week. But also, sometimes I miss just one-on-one competition. There is something about the multiplayer format that makes it not quite as pure Magic. And this isn't me trying to gatekeep. I love playing that stuff, but I also love playing one-on-one with one opponent, having mind games, knowing that there's only one of us that's going to win and there isn't some random king-making experience that's going to happen 3 hours into a game that we started because we wanted to play something quick and fun. This is a format where you can do a best of 3 in half an hour. It's that fast, and that's not just because, you know, you took down the players and the life totals. This is a fast, competitive format, and if you're used to playing casual Commander decks and silly things, it can be really fun to try out decks that, you know, Magic pros are playing that you don't have to fork out an arm and a leg just to get your hands on. And you know, you don't have to be a competitive player to enjoy this format. Like, it's also just a much more interesting play space, especially in modern Magic, than a lot of standard stuff is. When you've got a limited rotation and cards that are just basically explaining how to win the game to you in their rules text, you get a lot of very similar decks being played. If you've played a lot of Arena, if you've grinded out on the ranked ladder like I have, you've probably seen more Monastery Swift Spears than you know what to do with. In Pauper, I play against people with decks that I've never seen the likes of. You know, there's obviously a meta, there's more popular decks than others, and sometimes one deck will just, you know, prop up a lot and you'll be like, oh, I'm a bit sick of seeing that. That's just playing a card game. However, the variance in what all these different decks are doing and trying to do is really interesting. If we open up MTG Goldfish now and look at the top meta decks that currently exist, and just look at the complete difference in how they all play, you'll get an idea for how healthy this meta is, how interesting it is to get down on a game and not know what's going to come up against you on the other side of the table. Top, we have Grixis Affinity. It wants to dump artifacts on the board, use artifact lands, which you have access to, which is really cool, and make sure that you can play pretty much everything in your hand for free, whilst also grinding down your opponent with control effects and lots of card advantage. We've got the Brood Scale combo that I referenced earlier, trying to win with infinite mana and infinite power on one big creature. There's Mono Red Synthesizer, just beautiful burn, just the most gorgeous mono red burn you've ever seen, dumping goblins on the board and flinging lightning bolts, just classic Magic the Gathering. There's Gruul Ramp, which uses land destruction. I know that not a lot of people like land destruction, but that is not a thing that you see very often anymore, and I think that's kind of cool. We've got Mono Blue Delver, using the Tolarian Terrors from Dominaria that get cheaper with every instant sorcery that you have in your graveyard, using the classic Delver of Secrets, which gives the deck its name, just a really cool competitive Magic card that has popped up again already in Standard and is now accessible once more now that it's just been rotated out of Standard format. There's Mono Eye Aggro, there's a wall deck combo, there's things that use Glint Hawk to try and... there's lots of stuff in this meta. There's Boggles, there's Ephemerate, there's Mono White Heroic, there's Goblins, there's Turbo Fog. There's just an insane amount of different deck archetypes that you will genuinely see playing, and you can just construct them for so cheap. It means that you can just play them whenever you want. We have just been building random top meta decks and playing them against each other, and it means that me and Maddie can just sit on a table and play tournament level Magic whenever we want. It's really cool. Here's a genuine turn one play that I had in a game recently with this silly reanimated combo deck that we found on Moxfield. I'm going to play a Swamp. I'm then going to tap that Swamp to play a Dark Ritual, which adds 3 black mana to my mana pool, and then play another one, leaving me with a total of 5 black mana in my mana pool. On turn 1, bear in mind, I'm then going to exile a Simian Spirit Guide from my hand, adding another mana, but in this case red, to my hand. That has become exiled, and now I have 6 mana. I'm going to spend 1 black and a red to play Bitter Reunion. This says when it enters the battlefield, I may discard a card, and if I do, I will draw 2 cards. I'm going to discard this Ulamog's Crusher. It's an 8/8 Annihilator 2 that attacks each combat if able. I discard that, I draw 2 cards, and then with the remaining black mana in my hand, I'm going to play Exhume. It reads, each player chooses a creature card in their graveyard and puts that creature into play. I choose the Ulamog's Crusher. I then put it into play. I use this Ulamog's Crusher on turn 1 because I can sacrifice the Bitter Reunion for 1 mana, making all my creatures haste, and then I swing for 8 with Annihilator 2. My opponent sacrifices their land, and every single thing that they play from now on will be sacrificed to Annihilator, effectively locking them out of the game and winning before they've even had a chance to do anything. That's quite silly, isn't it? It's fun though. Okay, obviously that's quite a ridiculous turn 1, and I wouldn't expect you to do that if you were just playing casually. You can just build a deck out of normal commons and have a good time. But that is pretty fun, isn't it? And also, bear in mind that you don't have to play tournament level Magic. Like, you know, this isn't the only way to play Pauper. It's just the fact that up until now, I haven't really had access to tournament level Magic. I can't afford to buy 40 mythics and shove them into a deck. I know that's not quite how it works, but you know, $1,000 to play a top meta deck in Modern is pretty prohibitive. Even just to get a good land base will set you back a ridiculous amount of money. So having access to this kind of stuff is really exciting. If you've never tried a deck that powerful before, it feels so good, especially when you've got an opponent playing a deck that's at a similar power level. All right, so let's say I've tempted you. How do I actually, you know, get a game of Pauper going? How do I play Pauper locally? How do I get it on Paper Magic? Well, first of all, you know, if you don't have anywhere local to play, you can play on Magic the Gathering Online. It is a far clunkier and uglier version of Magic the Gathering Arena that's not quite as swish and doesn't have quite as many cool effects, but it does have access to pretty much all the cards ever printed on Magic, and also it's a lot easier to just get a deck list going because you can basically just buy singles like you would in real life. It's not the cheapest way to do it, of course, although it is cheaper than buying some decks in paper. So if you don't really care about playing in paper, that's a good way to go. The alternative thing is to find a local scene that plays Pauper, and that is where this video turns into a bit less of a recommendation and a bit more of a call to arms. Pauper is not the most played format in Magic, which is a shame because, you know, it's accessible, but it's powerful and it's a lot cheaper to get into, and I love it a lot. I've only really started playing it recently, so maybe I've got that kind of like new convert itch, but I'm gagging for more people to play this format and to experience how cool it is as a mediocre Magic the Gathering player to play really powerful decks. But even my local game store, Dice Saloon, if you're watching, love you guys, do more Pauper events. You know, they only have an official thing that runs like once a quarter or something like that, which is really sparse. And if you want to be playing, you know, proper like league gameplay, you want to go every week and, you know, grind against other decks and really get your playstyle fine-tuned, that's tough. You know, luckily I live with someone who loves playing Magic, so we just play together, but we want more people to experience this format. So I just am asking you, if you have a local Magic scene and they're not aware of Pauper, try and get them into it. Maybe build some cheap decks that you can lend out to people to give them a taste for what it's like, because Pauper is so good. Oh my God, it's so good. And it doesn't feed into the constant purchasing machine that Magic the Gathering usually is. It doesn't require you to completely change your deck list every 5 seconds because they've released another set this week that, you know, the week after they already released one before. And it allows you to engage with elements of the hobby that you might not really be familiar with already. If you live in Brighton in the UK, which is where I live, we're trying to make Pauper more of a thing here. Like, we are trying to have a bit of a push towards it becoming a weekly thing that you can just do at a local game shop. If you're interested in that, watch this space. Maddie and I are trying to start like a little Pauper league, probably in Dice Saloon. But until then, give it a go. Maybe play it online, build a deck or two that you can play with your friends, and just experience how much fun this format is. It's so good. I know I've just been rambling at the camera for a long time. I love Pauper. It's so fun, and I'm almost annoyed that I hadn't heard of it until now, or at least I hadn't heard how good it is until now. Well, obviously familiar with the format itself, but God, it's so fun and no one's talking about it, or at least they're not talking about it enough. So here's my attempt to bring some more eyes onto this format. Play Pauper, get involved, come down to Brighton and play with us. And thanks very much for watching, just for fun. See you on the next one.